What's up, meatheads? Welcome to Cookin' Meat. It is a banner day here in the Cookin' Meat studio. Keeping with my campaign promises, this season of Cookin' Meat, we're taking it up a notch, taking a lot of the silliness out and put a lot of the seriousness in. We have Cookin' Meat merch available now on our website, www.cookinmeat.net. Please check out our website. We got clips from the show, we got merch, we have shirts, hats, and don't forget, for that special meathead in your life, 1 second, we got brand new aprons in all your favorite colors: blue, purple, yellow, and I think maybe orange. Everything is made from the highest quality standards. Look at it, this is a thick ass shirt. A slight breeze isn't gonna get you cold at all. Aprons, high quality, you can cook in these. You don't wanna wash your hands? Not only are they gorgeous and bring out the color of my eye, grease-proof, washable, flame retarded, everything you want in an apron. That's embroidered. That's not coming off in the wash, right? Embroidered hats, snapbacks. You got a bunch of holes so your head can breathe. You know it's hot in the kitchen. You want to be able to, you have a little chimney, get the heat out. Shirts come in black and white. Aprons come in, I think, 4 colors. Just one hat. All this and more on cookinmeat.net. So join us on this very special Cookin' Meat episode where we put this, oh shit, pockets? Hell yeah, dude. Let's get cooking. All right, today we're cooking a flat iron steak with a little bit of a, I wouldn't call it a demi-glace. Demi-glace takes a long time to cook. You need about 8 to 10 hours. We're gonna make what I call a semi-demi. It's just a really quick, you can call it demi-glace, but we're gonna kind of cheat and cut a little corner just for time. Also, we're not cooking for a restaurant. Also, we're just cooking for us here. Also, we promised you we would keep it simple this season, and this is something that I think you can do. No overnight rabbit this season. So what we're gonna do is fairly simple. We're gonna roast some bone marrow. We're gonna get that going in the oven. We'll take about 40 minutes. We'll keep it real simple. We're gonna reduce that. We'll make a little bit of mashed potatoes just to have some starch to go with it. Then we'll pan sear our flat iron steak, brought to you by Christensen Ranch, the beefiest meat in all of Colorado. ChristensenRanch.com. And thank you again for also always providing amazing tasting, responsibly raised beef. All right, so we're gonna start off doing the bone marrow semi-demi. We're gonna start off by getting our cast iron Dutch oven hot. We're gonna add a pretty generous helping of tallow, get the bottom lubed. Perfect. Roasting bone marrow is pretty easy, and the reason why you want to do it is if you, let's just say we threw in this bone marrow raw into like a stock that we're trying to like boil or whatever. The bone marrow is really hard and dense, and when it cooks and the fat starts to render, it softens up a little bit so it breaks down a little bit easier. It also adds like a more fatty flavor to it because the beef is rendering out oil separately. You're getting a little bit of cook on the meat, so you're just adding a little bit of roasted flavor, and you're really rendering out that fat before you throw it in, rather than putting it in and having the liquid render it out. You're just gonna get a little more out of the bones by roasting them first. And we get our bone marrow. Also brought to you by Christensen Ranch. See that? See how the bone marrow right in there? It's like solid. So if you throw that in straight water, it's not gonna render out as much as it would if we just roast it without any kind of liquid or whatever. So we got tallow going. We'll put these guys in there just so it doesn't stick. Put all these sides down. That should be good for what we're doing. And then all we're gonna do for this is we're gonna add some nice big chunky rock salt. This fancy salt my in-laws got for me from Croatia. So shout out to me, Mom, and Granddad. Thanks for the salt. Just big chunks of rock salt. Doesn't even matter. It'll all be good. And that is basically all we're gonna do for that. We got that cooking hot. I just like to make sure it's not gonna stick completely, so you know we can kind of move them around there. It's all loose, and then we will let this go in the oven on 375 for about 40 minutes. That one bigger one was still a little frozen. That we might go 45 minutes, but the other ones will be fine. All right, so we got our bones roasting in the oven. So now let's head on over to the periodic table of beef to learn a little bit more about the flat iron steak. Brought to you by Christensen Ranch. Let's head on over, guys. All right, the flat iron steak. If you had seen the Chef Pat's top 5 favorite steaks to cook and eat, you'll know that flat iron steak is one of my personal favorites. Florida State and the University of Nebraska were both given grants, basically by the US Department of Agriculture, to find a suitable cut of beef that's good for grilling, specifically in the chuck, because most times chuck is just either used for ground beef or for slow roasts and stews, like steak pies, anything kind of slow roasted, braised beef, anything like that. That's usually what the chuck is for. I'm pretty sure beef sales were down in the 90s, so the agriculture went to these 2 universities and said, hey, can you figure out a new cut of steak? And so using the grants, they went through the chuck guide, through the muscles, like all scientific, and they found this particular section of the chuck could be cut out and grilled like a steak. And that is how we got the flat iron steak. Let's refer to the periodic table of beef to see exactly where the chuck is and where the flat iron steak comes from. Here we are, the Christensen Ranch periodic table of beef. As you can see, the chuck right here is basically the shoulder of the cow. It's mostly pretty tough. So from the chuck, you can see a lot of roast, short ribs, tender steak, medallions, Denver steak. Here's what we're doing right here. This is the flat iron steak. This flat iron steak right here, it kind of has, I wouldn't call it a loin, but you can basically make it into a big flat iron steak or kind of chunk it up. Thank you again to Christensen Ranch for the periodic table of beef. Let's get back on and start making some mashed potatoes. All right, for the next step in this process for what we're gonna do is we're gonna make some mashed potatoes. Potatoes. Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew. We're gonna mash them. There's a lot of different kinds of potatoes. And I personally feel different potatoes serve better in different roles. Big Idaho russet potato for like French fries and baked potatoes. I like the red potatoes for boiled potatoes. Fingerlings for roasted potatoes. Purple potatoes for a cool purple mash. The best potato, in my opinion, for mashed potatoes are gold potatoes. The Yukon Golds, the old Yukis. So we're gonna do a couple of those, peel them, boil them whole with some salt, and that's about it. Keeping it simple this season. And for the first time this season, ladies and gentlemen of the meats, it's Super Peeler. Super big, super effective. Let's get peeling. Take a quick look at this stuff. Yeah, look at Super Peeler go. Shout out Mrs. Meat, as always. Keeping with theme of the season, it's a simple season on cooking meat. Not gonna do too much to the mashed potatoes. A little bit of salt, a very thorough boil, big chunk of butter, and we'll all whip it together for a nice potatoy treat. All right, so we got some good salt, put a little on that guy. The colder meat is, the stiffer it is, right? So if you put like a cold piece of meat, that's sometimes when you get like just a cooked part right here and the edges are still kind of raw. The more room temperature meat is, the more floppy it is. So it'll basically flop and get a more complete sear. It'll take a little bit less time to cook and it'll cook more evenly. Alrighty, meatheads. Next step in the process for cooking our semi-demi glazed demi-glaze. What we did was we roasted these bone marrows. Look at all that fat that's been rendered out right there. So we're gonna pull these aside and see, remember how I showed you earlier how hard the bone marrow was? Look at how like gelatinous this is now. So that's gonna be able to incorporate way easier into the demi-glace that we're making. So we're gonna leave all this fat and fond in there. And what we're gonna do next is we're just gonna throw a bunch of our vegetables in there that we're gonna use to kind of build our demi-glace. I don't know why I didn't pull all this stuff out earlier. We're gonna make this real easy. We're not gonna even peel stuff. We're gonna throw in some carrots, some celery, some onions, some garlic, some herbs, some tomato paste, deglaze it all with wine, and then reduce it down. Easy money. We'll take, let's say, 3 carrots. For this kind of thing, it doesn't have to be like clean at all. Rough cuts are perfect. I'll just cut the ends off, like the butts off of there, and then just chunk it up like that, right? Perfect. Chunks of carrot. Throw that into our rendered bone marrow stuff. Right, the same thing with celery. Always wash your celery. The grocery stores trick you because it looks wet when you buy it, but it's not washed. Same thing. We're gonna give this just a real easy rough chop, and bang, celery goes in. Onions and garlic. We're gonna just have these guys, and I say probably 1/2 an onion's fine. We don't need to go crazy. Just big chunks. Throw that in there. A couple of bay leaves, touch of sage, and you know we always got thyme for thyme. So we'll saute all this up. So last thing we're gonna do, we're gonna put 3 cloves of garlic. It's like a baby being born, little baby garlic being born. So we're gonna throw these guys in just whole. But we're gonna add some tomato paste to this. Get some nice color on everything and bring out some of that sugar out of everything. And this is all getting I didn't add any oil or tallow or anything. It's all getting sauteed in what's been rendered out of those bone marrows that we started off with. You can really start to smell it already. You can smell all the herbs. You can smell the sweetness from the carrots and the tomatoes. Kind of get a little bit of that roasted onion drifting up. So all of it's starting to blend together. When I deglaze stuff and cook with wine, I like to use drinking wine. I don't like to use cooking wine. Honestly, the better quality wine you use, the better it tastes in your food. So we're gonna give this a nice little deglaze. I wouldn't say cover it, but enough to really just kind of coat the bottom of the pan about a like inch or so. We're gonna throw our bone marrows back in, and then we're gonna cover everything with water. So I'm not gonna add any salt yet. I'm gonna wait till everything's reduced to the level that I want it reduced at, and then I'll add the salt. It's kind of hard to gauge the amount of salt you need because you add it when there's a lot of liquid, and then it reduces and it tastes fine, and then you reduce it down, and then it's like, oh my God, it's salty. So what I like to do when I do stuff like this is I will reduce it down to the consistency or level that I want it to be reduced at, and then I'll add the salt to bring up the flavor. All right, just enough to cover it. Now, if you're familiar with demi-glace, this is already starting to get that demi-glace color. When you make real demi-glace, if we were to do this the real way, we would be reducing this down for 8 to 10 hours. I mean, you can really reduce it down to where it's like gelatinous, but we're not gonna do all that. Like I said, we're gonna make a semi-demi. We don't have time for that this season on cooking meat. Hey, we're not cooking in restaurants. We're cooking at home. This is for all the meatheads at home, all the homies. This is for you, so you can do this at home. This will be easy. We're gonna reduce this now, let's just say half an hour, and we're gonna reduce it hard. We're not gonna let it simmer a little bit. We're gonna get it really boiling. Maybe the last 20 minutes will simmer, whatever, and then we'll kind of thicken it on our own. We're gonna try and just get a lot of this flavor to make a quick little semi-demi, and then we'll move on from there. Let me clean all this mess up, and we'll let this go, and then we'll check back in a few minutes. All right, so look at how far we've reduced this down. This is getting nice and thick. We got our potatoes are done. Our steak is out at room temperature. We're just gonna do our last little bits of things. We're gonna take our bone marrows out. Oh, snake bite's gonna be a happy dog today. And yeah, and no seasoning in this yet either. Seasoning isn't good for your dogs. That's all I'm trying to say. This isn't real demi-glaze. We're calling it semi-demi. Once it reduces, you strain it, kind of skim all the fat off it, let it chill, and then it kind of really thickens up. So normally let this reduce about 8 hours. But if I sat around and smoked weed for 8 hours, nobody would be eating in my house. And I got kids. So we're gonna take this over here. Be right back. So the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna basically blend up all these vegetables that is cooked in there and then add it back into our liquid. So we're gonna pick out the big stems of like thyme and stuff like that. It's not gonna blend. But everything else, onions, carrots, garlic, that can all stay. Get nice and thick for us, all right? We're gonna put all this carrot, garlic, onion in there. Put the liquid in here. Blend it all up together. We're starting to get there, guys. This is probably the longest process of the thing. Everything else, mashed potatoes, cooking steak, super easy. We're just trying to dress it up, but even still, this is a fairly simple version of a demi-glace. So what we're gonna do one more time is we're gonna run this thing back through that metal strainer back into that bowl, and then I'll show you how we're gonna cheat and thicken this up by not doing it the right way. And this is us gonna get all the big chunks. Because we don't want the chunks, but we want the flavor and the liquid, but we don't want the chunks. You can see it in there. We're getting the liquid out and we're keeping the chunks. Just gotta have a little patience sometimes, meatheads. There are very few steak sauces that I like to use. Most of the time when I eat steak, I just put straight horseradish on there. Every once in a while, you know, it's just kind of fun to do something like this. You got bone marrow, you got all this flavorful stuff. We're gonna thicken this up real fast. Look at that, now that's all the carrot and celery and onion and all that stuff, just the pulp left over, and we basically emulsified and blended all that carrot and onion into the liquid to extract more flavor out of it, just to kind of deepen the flavor. But that's about it. That's the pulp, and we're not gonna use that, so we're gonna pull this away. If we were making real demi, we would reduce this until it was super thick and syrupy. But what we're gonna do instead is we're gonna make a roux, which is definitely not how you make a demi-glace. It's a semi-demi, relax everybody. And what we're gonna do this time is we're gonna take this roux and we're gonna really push it as far as color goes. Demi is usually a pretty dark color, and sometimes when you make a pretty basic roux, it's a light color, so you mix the two, you know, it's kind of a lighter thing. So we're gonna start off with some tallow, as is tradition in cooking meat. A nice, good helping of tallow. Watching tallow render, baby. We used to do tallow races across the flat top back in the kitchen. Have a piece of tallow, get your flat top hot, slide it across and see who gets the other side. I lost a lot of money on the tallow races. So normally when I make roux like this, I'll get the flour, get it all incorporated, kind of take it off the heat. This time we're gonna keep it on the heat. We're even gonna kind of turn up the heat a little bit to make our semi-demi. I got a semi-demi right now just thinking about it. And if you've got a semi-demi at home, you can hide it with a new cooking meat apron. Red, blue, yellow, and maybe orange. I'm gonna get it all nice and thick. And because little semi-demi's got a lot of fat in it from the bone marrow, we're gonna add a little extra flour and kind of clump it up so that it kind of compensates for the fat that's in that and binds that too. If we make this too thin and we add that, it's gonna break because of the amount of fat that's in the semi-demi. That's what we want. Nice, thick paste. I don't want to say burn, but it'll brown real easily. That'll help us cheat and get the color of the demi. And the reason why I keep stirring it is because if you let it sit for too long, it will burn. So this will kind of help get the color without having it burn. It's almost like the flour in it starts to toast. That's kind of why it starts to change colors. I don't want to call myself a scientist, but the results speak for itself. It's because the atoms are binding. What we see here are the molecules of the flour and the molecules of the fat binding due to nuclear fusion. You're saying, hey, Chef Pat, where do you get your information from? From food scientist Neil deGrasse Fed Bison. It's just starting to brown. You're starting to get a little more color out of it than you would when it was just whitish. So I don't know if you see from when we started, it's now a brown. So now we've got some color to it. So we're gonna add our... Ooh. And it already kind of looks like demi. It's a little light on color, but again, it's a semi-demi. After spending New Year's Eve with director, editor, producer Ricky and doing our New Year's Eve special, I got a really good glimpse on how the common man live. That's when we decided, you know what, we gotta do some simpler recipes. We can't be going crazy. Not everyone's a home chef. Not everyone has a double French doored smart oven. Not everyone has a knife sponsor, a beef sponsor. You know, I started to get it. So we're really focusing on regular ass recipes for y'all. So now we're gonna add some salt. That's all we gotta do left. So yep, we're just adding our big chunks of Soviet Union salt to bring in the flavor, and I bet you that's all the seasoning we need is just salt. And it's a nice brown color. It's a beautiful color. Demi is usually a lot darker, but I have no problems at all calling this a semi-demi. Since I invented a semi-demi, this is exactly how I wanted it to look, so I did it right. If it's darker than this, you did the semi-demi wrong. That's a 3/4 demi, or even almost a full demi. It's a fancy name for gravy, all right? But there we go. That's gosh dang good, you guys. Now it's time to shine. Let's cook our steak. All right, demi is done. Potatoes are boiled. Next up, we are going to cook this steak. We're gonna do this a little differently than usual. We're gonna do this more like a restaurant style pan sear. Tallow, some butter, some rosemary, some garlic. I'm gonna give it a little butter baste. So first things first, gotta get a little tallow going. Flat iron, because it comes from the chuck and it's a little bit more, I wouldn't say tough, but the chuck itself is a lot less fatty. You need to add some sort of fat to the pan to kind of cook it out. We're gonna use our patented signature cooking meat steak rub. 2 parts salt, 1 part garlic powder, 1 part fresh cracked pepper. We're gonna add a generous helping. We like to season the things pretty good here on cooking meat. All right, and these aren't super thick, so we're not gonna cook these for super long. Basically get the pan real nice and hot. We're going to give it a nice sear, and then we're gonna give it a nice baste. And that's about it, you guys. Once this butter's all the way rendered, we'll throw our steaks in there. We got tallow butter, salted steaks. So if these steaks were a little thicker, I'd say wait to throw your rosemary and garlic in if you're doing butter basting. But because this is a thin steak, we'll do it now. And the reason why is if you throw this in the beginning and start, this will be burnt and the garlic will be burnt by the time you're done doing that. So if you don't want to burn it, what you do is you usually throw it halfway in. You sear one side, flip your steaks, then throw your garlic and your rosemary in, and then you can kind of baste it and keep basting and basting and basting. However, these are thin, so I don't think we're gonna have enough time to do that, so we're gonna throw it in right when we throw the steaks in. All right, the butter is down. Rosemary in. Big old fat chunks of garlic in. Steaks in. Oh yeah. Kind of give them a little move around, make sure they get all of it incorporated. All right, see, look how fast this garlic is already going and the rosemary is going, right? So that's why I usually say throw them in towards the end. This is pretty fast. So we want to get that flavor really incorporated into this butter paste. Once we start to see a little bit of liquid well up, we'll know it's kind of getting to the point where we want it to be. And I'm not basting it now because I don't want to throw the butter onto the steak right now. It won't cook it, but it will start to cook the very outside layer of it. It'll change the color of it. And I want to wait until, ooh, my nipples are chafing. And I want to wait until I sear it first. So the hot butter and oil in the pan sear it all at once. This is for science. Neil deGrasse fed bison would be proud. So see how the color is starting to change a little bit? Right there, it's kind of graying. We don't want that to happen too soon because it'll kind of ruin our sear. Once that other side is seared, we're gonna baste the heck out of it. There we go, flip it over. Look at that beautiful sear. And now we're going to baste this on this side. We'll get this right here, and we're gonna baste this up here. So all that butter has absorbed a lot of that flavor. So basically we are just perfuming these steaks with that butter. All that rosemary, garlic butter. Oh my goodness, this is gonna be so good. Got such great aroma off it already. Do another round of basting real fast. Give it 2 minutes, and then let those guys rest. We'll make our mashed potatoes, and then we got ourselves a fucking meal, baby. So we got a nice sear on this side too. Another beautiful sear on this side. And then we'll add a little bit of the butter baste to the side that we didn't baste. All right, we're gonna let those rest for a couple minutes and we'll make our mashed potatoes. When I make mashed potatoes, I like to keep a little water from the boil because it's basically like potato starchy water. I don't use a lot of it, but I keep a little bit of there, mix it with some butter. It kind of helps it make thick and creamy potatoes. Tiny little bit of water at the bottom of the pan. Get ourselves a big slab of butter. This is what you want for mashed potatoes. Are they just gonna fall apart? When I do mashed potatoes, I also don't like to use a potato masher. For whatever reason, I don't like the way the chunky, the textures. When I use a whisk, I can kind of make them not completely whipped, but almost whipped potatoes. We still got a few good, nice chunks in there, but it's not as weird as a potato masher. You mash your potatoes however you want. I like to use a whisk. Nice whipped potatoes. And if you use enough butter, a little bit of that potato water, you don't need to add any milk. That's what I usually don't add milk. Mine's just butter and that potato water, and that gives me a nice, thick, creamy mashed potato. We added a lot of salt to the water, so before we add any salt or any pepper or anything, we should taste it just to make sure that we don't need to add any stuff. Touch of salt and then some pepper and we're good. Having these thick starchy potatoes, especially when you have something like this when we're gonna add like a gravy to it, it's nice to have them kind of thick to absorb whatever gravy you're putting on. That's why I make them thick. And if you want to add garlic, you can add some garlic powder in here, make some garlic potatoes. You can add some cheddar, make some white cheddar potatoes. Do whatever you want, follow your heart. We're keeping it simple. Gravy, potatoes, steak, we're ready. So these have been resting for 3-4 minutes. I'm gonna give them another minute or two. So we're gonna do a big, nice thing of mashed potatoes. This is gonna be another complete dish kind of thing. When you're plating and stuff, especially if you're doing it for restaurants or if you're doing private dining or something like that, if you do 3 separate things, you know, it just doesn't look good on the plate, especially if everything tastes good together and you want people to eat it together. So instead of doing like a mashed potatoes, steak, you know, a vegetable, whatever, we're gonna kind of build it up just like this. So we'll put a big helping of creamy, thick mashed potatoes right in the middle. Slice our steaks. We're gonna slice it a little thick over here, right along that. Star of the show. The whole reason why I did it, bone marrow semi-demi. Now, if you want to garnish it with anything, this is the time. You can do fresh parsley. The acidity of parsley would be good. You can do some microgreens. You can do some crispy onions would be really good, like some onion straws or whatever. We're keeping it simple. We're not doing any of that. I can't. In good consciousness, I can't. Fresh parsley. I have it. I might as well do it. I can't half-ass it that much, okay? It's gotta be a little nice. All right, so there we go. So let's try this. Oh, this is gonna be good, you guys. Even though we rested it, we still leaked a little blood. Sometimes it just happens. Don't beat yourself up if it looks like this. We still rested it for a good amount of time, about 5 minutes. It just falls apart. Flatiron steak is a very tender steak. It's got some good chew to it, and it's beefy. Dude, the semi-demi is good. Oh yeah. It's very rich because of all the bone. We roasted the bone, we boiled the bones for an hour. We blended up all the vegetables into the liquid, reduced that, strained that, and then just added, all we need to do is add some salt. All the richness from all those vegetables and the bone marrow and the tallow, it's just super rich and super light because of how we did it. A little bit of a roux, like I said, we cheated, it's a semi-demi, but that's still okay, especially if you don't want to cook for 8 hours. That is so good, dude. The gravy's kind of holding in the mashed potato. It's not just turning into like a mashed potato soup. You can get hints of the rosemary and the garlic on the steak from the butter based. But man, this is fantastic. Well, meatheads, we've done it again. This is a simple, easy, delicious steak dinner that you can make for you, your family, your loved ones, someone you're trying to bang, someone you're trying to impress, whoever it may be. This is a little bit more done up than just some steak and mashed potatoes. The semi-demi is super rich. It's kind of a cool take on it. It's not necessarily gravy, and if you eat it, it doesn't have like a gravy texture, even though we did a little bit of a roux. So thanks again for stopping by. Don't forget to check out cookandmeat.net so you can get your very own Cookin' Meat merchandise. Hats, aprons, shirts, all for you and anyone you love. All right, meatheads, I gotta get some bone marrow to snake bite and get this mess cleaned up. You guys have a good one. All right, snake bite, where are you? Snake bite. Snake bite. Have you seen snake bite anywhere?